In the middle of a frozen battlefield, where the stench of gunpowder mixed with the metallic taste of fear, a woman crouched behind enemy lines with nothing but a rifle and a reputation that would soon shake the very foundations of warfare. Her name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, and history would remember her as one of the most lethal snipers who ever lived. But on this particular day, in 1942, as she lined up what would become her most legendary shot, she was still known to her comrades as simply the Cook, a title that would prove to be the most dangerous underestimation in military history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Eastern Front during World War II was a hellscape that defied human comprehension. Temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, turning human breath into crystalline clouds that could give away positions to enemy scouts. Landscapes stretched endlessly, a white canvas painted with the dark stains of war, where survival wasn't just about avoiding bullets, but about staying alive long enough to matter. It was here, in this frozen theater of death, that ordinary people were transformed into legends, and where a young Ukrainian woman would prove that the most underestimated weapon on any battlefield is the human spirit. Lyudmila hadn't started her journey as a soldier. Born in 1916 in a small village outside Kiev, she was the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress, working-class people who understood that survival required both intelligence and determination. As a child, she showed an unusual fascination with precision and patience. While other children played games that required quick movements and loud voices, Lyudmila would spend hours watching birds through her father's old hunting scope, learning to predict their flight patterns, understanding the subtle art of anticipation that would later save her life countless times. Her childhood was marked by the turbulent times of early Soviet history. The Russian Revolution had ended just before her birth, and she grew up in a world where traditional gender roles were being challenged and redefined. The Soviet Union, for all its flaws, promoted an ideology where women could aspire to roles previously reserved for men. This wasn't just political rhetoric, it was a practical necessity in a nation that needed every capable person to contribute to its survival and growth. When Lyudmila reached her teenage years, she discovered shooting sports at her local club. This wasn't unusual for Soviet youth. Marksmanship was considered an important skill for both men and women, part of the broader military preparedness that characterized Soviet education. But Lyudmila displayed an almost supernatural talent with a rifle. Her instructors noticed that she could hit targets that seasoned shooters struggled with, and more importantly, she could do it consistently, under pressure, when it mattered. What set her apart wasn't just her accuracy, though that was remarkable, but her ability to remain completely calm under stress. While other shooters would tense up during competitions, their breathing becoming irregular and their hands shaking slightly, Lyudmila seemed to enter a state of perfect stillness. Her heartbeat would slow, her vision would sharpen, and the world around her would fade until there was nothing but the target, the rifle, and the inevitable connection between them. By the time she entered Kiev University to study history, Lyudmila had already established herself as one of the most promising marksmen in her region. She balanced her academic studies with continued shooting practice, never imagining that these two seemingly separate pursuits, understanding the past and perfecting her aim, would soon merge in ways that would define not just her own future, but the course of history itself. The university years were formative in ways that extended far beyond academics. Lyudmila studied the great military campaigns of history, learning about strategy, logistics, and the psychology of warfare. She read about famous battles, analyzing how terrain, weather, and human factors combined to determine outcomes. She was particularly fascinated by stories of individuals who had changed the course of conflicts through their specific skills, not generals or politicians, but individual soldiers whose unique abilities had created pivotal moments. During this time, she also met and married Alexei Pavlichenko, a fellow student who shared her intellectual curiosity but couldn't match her shooting skills. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and shared ideals about serving their country, though Alexei sometimes worried about his wife's intense focus on marksmanship. He would later say that when Lyudmila held a rifle, she seemed to transform into someone else entirely, someone he recognized but didn't entirely understand. The couple's peaceful academic life was shattered on June 22, 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. 3 million Axis troops, along with thousands of tanks and aircraft, crashed across the Soviet border like a steel tsunami. The invasion was designed to be swift and brutal. Hitler's generals believed they could conquer the Soviet Union. Within months, before winter set in and complicated their advance, for the Soviet people, the invasion was both a complete surprise and a confirmation of their worst fears. Despite intelligence warnings and obvious military buildups along the German border, Stalin had refused to believe that Hitler would break their non-aggression pact so quickly. The result was catastrophic. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and destroyed in the first weeks of the war. Millions of soldiers were captured or killed, and the German advance seemed unstoppable. In Kiev, the news arrived with the sound of distant explosions and the sight of refugees streaming eastward with whatever possessions they could carry. The university emptied almost overnight as male students and professors were called up for military service. Lyudmila watched as her world transformed from academic discussions and shooting competitions to desperate preparations for survival and resistance. The call for volunteers came within days. The Soviet military, reeling from massive losses and desperate for any trained personnel, began accepting applications from civilians with military-relevant skills. Lyudmila's shooting club records marked her as someone worth recruiting, but when she appeared at the local military recruitment office, the reaction was less than enthusiastic. The recruiting sergeant, a grizzled veteran of previous conflicts, looked at the young woman standing before him with undisguised skepticism. "You want to be a sniper?" he asked, glancing at her academic records and shooting scores. "This isn't target practice, girl. This is war. Men are dying out there." His tone wasn't necessarily cruel, but it reflected the attitude of a military establishment that had never seriously considered women in combat roles. Despite the Soviet rhetoric about equality, Lyudmila's response was characteristically direct. "Give me a rifle and a target," she said. "If I can't hit what I'm aiming at, send me home. If I can, give me a uniform." The sergeant, perhaps impressed by her confidence or simply curious about her abilities, agreed to a quick demonstration. The impromptu shooting test took place at a military range on the outskirts of Kiev. Lyudmila was given a standard Mosin Nagant rifle, the same weapon she would later use to make history, and asked to hit targets at various distances. What happened next became the stuff of legend among the soldiers who witnessed it. Not only did she hit every target, but she did so with a precision that impressed even the most experienced marksmen present. The sergeant's attitude changed immediately. Within hours, Lyudmila found herself officially enlisted in the 25th Sniped Division as a sniper, one of the first women to be assigned to such a role in the Soviet military. Her husband Alexei was assigned to a different unit, and they said goodbye, not knowing if they would ever see each other again. The war had transformed them from newlyweds and students into soldiers in a conflict that would determine the survival of their entire civilization. Her initial assignment was defensive. Kiev was expected to fall to the German advance, but the Soviet command wanted to make the Germans pay as high a price as possible for every mile of territory. Snipers were considered essential for this strategy because they could inflict casualties while remaining hidden, forcing enemy forces To advance more cautiously and consume more time and resources, Lyudmila's first combat assignment came sooner than anyone expected. The German Sixth Army, under the command of Field Marshal Walter von Reichenau, was approaching Kiev with unprecedented speed and force. Soviet defensive positions were being overrun daily, and there was desperate need for any tactic that could slow the German advance. Her commanding officer, Captain Dmitry Volkov, was initially unsure how to utilize his new female sniper. He had read her file and seen her shooting scores, but theoretical ability and combat performance were entirely different things. He decided to pair her with an experienced male sniper, Sergeant Pavel Kozlov, who could serve as both mentor and backup. Kozlov was a veteran of the Soviet-Finnish War and had already accounted for several enemy kills since the German invasion began. He was initially resistant to working with a woman, not out of personal prejudice, but because he worried that protecting her would compromise his own effectiveness. However, military discipline prevailed, and he agreed to take her on her first combat mission. The mission was straightforward in concept but terrifying in execution. German forces had established a forward observation post in a church tower in a small village about 15 miles west of Kiev. From this position, enemy spotters were directing artillery fire that was devastating Soviet defensive positions. The post needed to be eliminated, but it was too well defended for a direct assault. Sniper action was the only viable option. The approach to the village required a night march across terrain that had been fought over repeatedly. The ground was churned mud mixed with debris from previous battles, abandoned equipment, unexploded shells, and worse things that neither Lyudmila nor Kozlov wanted to examine too closely in the darkness. They moved in complete silence, communicating only through hand signals, each step planned and deliberate. Kozlov had chosen their hide site during a previous reconnaissance mission, a bombed-out farmhouse about 800 yards from the church. The distance was well within range for both their rifles, and the ruined building provided excellent concealment while offering clear lines of sight to their target. They arrived before dawn and immediately began the painstaking process of preparing their position. Professional sniping required far more than just accurate shooting. The hide had to be invisible from enemy observation, comfortable enough to occupy for many hours, and positioned to provide escape routes if discovered. Kozlov showed Lyudmila how to arrange debris to create concealment without making the position look artificially camouflaged. Every detail mattered. A glint of sunlight off a rifle scope, a movement that didn't match the natural environment. Even an unusual shadow could mean death. As the sun rose, they began their surveillance of the target. The church tower was approximately 40 feet high, with narrow windows that provided the German observers with excellent views of the surrounding countryside. Through their binoculars they could see movement within the tower, at least 3, possibly 4 enemy soldiers. The observers were clearly experienced. They moved carefully, avoiding silhouetting themselves against the windows, and changed positions regularly to prevent counter-sniper attacks. Kozlov explained the tactical situation in whispers. "They're professionals," he said. "Notice how they never stay in one window for more than a few minutes. And see how they've hung cloth to break up the outline of the windows. These aren't conscripts, they're trained specialists." This assessment made their mission significantly more dangerous. Professional soldiers would be harder to surprise and more likely to spot their position if they made any mistakes. The first several hours they simply observed and planned. Lyudmila learned to identify the patterns in the enemy observers' movements, noting which windows they favored, how long they spent in each position, and how they rotated their duties. This intelligence gathering was as important as the shooting itself. Understanding the enemy's behavior was the key to predicting their vulnerability. The opportunity came just after noon. One of the German observers, apparently becoming careless due to the quiet morning, lingered too long at the eastern window of the tower. He was using binoculars to scan the Soviet positions, presenting a clear profile target. Kozlov immediately recognized the opportunity, but faced a decision that would define Lyudmila's entire military career. "This is your shot," he whispered. To her, range is approximately 750 yards. "Wind is light but variable. Watch the grass between us and the target. The angle is slightly upward, so aim a bit lower than you normally would." He paused, looking at her carefully. "Are you ready for this? Once you fire, there's no going back. You'll be a combat sniper, not a shooting club champion." Lyudmila's response was to settle into her firing position with the calm precision she had displayed since childhood. She checked her rifle settings, adjusted her scope for the estimated range, and began the mental preparation that would become her signature approach to combat shooting. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, and the chaotic battlefield around her faded until there was only the target, the rifle, and the inevitable connection between them. The shot, when it came, was perfect. The German observer dropped immediately, his binoculars falling from the tower window to shatter on the ground below. The other enemy soldiers in the tower immediately took cover, but the damage was done. Their forward observation post was compromised, and the artillery direction that had been devastating Soviet positions was effectively ended. Kozlov looked at his new partner with a mixture of respect and amazement. 750 yards, he said quietly. "First combat shot, perfect kill." He paused, realizing that he was witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. "You're not just the cook anymore, Lyudmila. You're a sniper." But even as they celebrated this first success, neither of them could have imagined what lay ahead. This single shot was just the beginning of a campaign that would make Lyudmila Pavlichenko one of the most feared and respected snipers in military history. The German observers in that church tower were the first of 309 confirmed enemy kills that would establish her as the most successful female sniper of all time. As they prepared to evacuate their position, staying in one place too long after a shot was invariably fatal, Lyudmila felt a transformation within herself. The academic who had studied history was now making it. The shooting club champion who had hit paper targets was now eliminating enemy soldiers who threatened her homeland and her people. The war would demand everything from her, but she was ready to give it. The evacuation from their first sniper hide became Lyudmila's introduction to the brutal reality of combat survival. Within minutes of her successful shot, German mortar began raining down on their general area. The enemy had quickly triangulated the approximate location of the sniper fire and was systematically destroying every possible hiding place within a half-mile radius. The ground shook with each explosion, sending debris flying through the air and filling their lungs with dust and smoke. Kozlov grabbed Lyudmila's arm and pulled her toward their predetermined escape route, a drainage ditch that ran behind the farmhouse toward a wooded area approximately 300 yards away. "Keep your head down and move fast," he hissed. "The mortar are just the beginning. They'll have infantry moving to sweep this area within the hour." As if to emphasize his point, machine gun fire began chattering from multiple positions, bullets whining overhead as German soldiers attempted to suppress any possible sniper positions. The sprint to safety was a nightmare of mud, fear, and adrenaline. Lyudmila discovered that all her athletic training and competitive shooting experience had not prepared her for the sheer terror of being hunted by professional soldiers who wanted to kill her. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound could signal an approaching threat, and every step could trigger a mine or booby trap left by retreating Soviet forces. They reached the tree line just as German infantry began their systematic search of the farmhouse area. From their concealment among the dense pine trees, they could watch enemy soldiers methodically examining every possible sniper position, checking angles of fire, and looking for spent cartridge cases or other evidence of their presence. The Germans were thorough and professional, qualities that made them dangerous opponents, but also predictable ones for observers who understood their methods. "Watch how they work," Kozlov whispered as they observed the enemy search pattern. "They're good, but they follow standard procedures. That's both their strength and their weakness. If you understand their methods, you can stay one step ahead of them." This lesson in enemy behavior analysis would prove crucial in the months ahead, as Lyudmila developed her own tactical approaches to sniper warfare. Over the following weeks, the pattern was repeated dozens of times. Lyudmila and various partners would identify high-value targets, plan their approach, execute successful shots, and then evade the inevitable counterattack. Her kill count grew steadily. 5 then 10, then 20 confirmed enemy deaths. Each success brought increased confidence and refined techniques, but also attracted more attention from German counter-sniper units. The German army was not passive in the face of effective sniper operations. They began deploying their own trained marksmen specifically to hunt Soviet snipers, and they established protocols for rapid response to sniper attacks. German counter-snipers were among the best in the world, equipped with excellent optics and extensive training in camouflage and fieldcraft. The war was evolving from random violence into a deadly chess match between highly skilled opponents. Lyudmila's reputation began to spread beyond her immediate unit. Stories of the female sniper who had never missed a shot became part of the folklore that sustained Soviet morale during the darkest days of the war. Soldiers who had never seen her would speak of her exploits, often exaggerating her achievements but always with profound respect for her contributions to their collective survival. Her commanding officers recognized that they had discovered something exceptional. Captain Volkov recommended her for advanced sniper training, and she was temporarily assigned to a specialized school where the Soviet military's best marksmen shared their knowledge with promising newcomers. The training was intensive and comprehensive, covering not just shooting techniques but also camouflage, stalking, range estimation, weather effects on ballistics, and psychological preparation for the unique stresses of sniper warfare. The advanced training introduced Lyudmila to concepts and techniques that transformed her from a talented amateur into a true professional. She learned about wind reading, how to judge the effect of crosswinds on bullet trajectory by observing grass movement, dust patterns, and other environmental indicators. She studied ballistics tables that showed how temperature, humidity, and altitude affected her rifle's performance. Most importantly, she learned about patience and discipline, the mental skills that separated successful snipers from dead ones. One of her instructors was Major Ivan Sidorenko, himself a veteran sniper with over 40 confirmed kills. Sidorenko recognized Lyudmila's exceptional potential, but worried about her psychological preparation for the extended campaign ahead. "Killing enemy soldiers is necessary," he told her during one of their private sessions, "but it changes you in ways you won't understand until later. The successful snipers are those who can maintain their humanity while doing inhuman things." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Upon returning to active duty, Lyudmila found herself assigned to the defense of Sevastopol, the crucial naval fortress that controlled access to the Black Sea. The city was under siege by German and Romanian forces, and the situation was desperate. The defenders were outnumbered, outgunned, and gradually being pushed back toward the sea. Every day brought new crises, and every night brought the possibility that morning would find enemy flags flying over the city. Sevastopol was where Lyudmila would face her greatest challenges and achieve her most legendary accomplishments. The siege created a concentrated battlefield where snipers could have maximum impact. Targets were plentiful, ranges were predictable, and successful shots could significantly affect local tactical situations. It was also where she would encounter her most dangerous opponents and where her Reputation would either be confirmed or destroyed. The German forces besieging Sevastopol included some of their most experienced units. The 11th Army, under the command of General Erich von Manstein, was among the Wehrmacht's most capable formations, with extensive experience in siege warfare and urban combat. They had learned to respect Soviet snipers and had developed sophisticated countermeasures, including their own sniper teams specifically trained to hunt their Soviet counterparts. Lyudmila's first assignment in Sevastopol involved defending a sector of the perimeter where German forces were attempting to establish forward observation posts. These positions were crucial for directing artillery fire against Soviet defensive positions, and eliminating them required precise, long-range shooting under difficult conditions. The area was heavily contested, with constant exchanges of small arms fire and frequent artillery bombardments that made accurate shooting extremely challenging. Her new partner was Senior Sergeant Nikolai Krasovchenko, a veteran of the Spanish Civil War who had already accounted for 37 enemy kills since the German invasion began. Krasovchenko was initially skeptical about working with a woman, but her reputation had preceded her, and he was willing to give her a chance to prove herself under the intense conditions of the Sevastopol siege. Their first mission together was to eliminate a German mortar crew that had been harassing Soviet supply lines. The enemy position was located in a partially destroyed apartment building approximately 900 yards from their assigned hide site. Intelligence indicated that the mortar crew consisted of 4 soldiers who had been operating from different windows to avoid counter-battery fire. The tactical situation was complicated by the urban environment. Unlike the open countryside around Kiev, Sevastopol presented challenges of angles, concealment, and civilian considerations that required entirely different approaches. Buildings created wind patterns that affected bullet trajectories unpredictably. Debris and rubble provided concealment for both sides, and the three-dimensional nature of urban combat meant that threats could come from any direction. Krasovchenko and Lyudmila spent 2 days observing their target before attempting their first shots. They noted that the German mortar crew followed a fairly predictable routine, firing missions every 2 to 3 hours, with individual crew members taking turns at observation and firing duties. The pattern provided opportunities, but it also meant that the Germans were experienced and disciplined, making them dangerous opponents. The opportunity came on their 3rd day of observation. One of the German soldiers, apparently feeling secure in his position, exposed himself while adjusting the mortar's elevation. The range was challenging, 900 yards, through urban terrain with variable winds, but well within Lyudmila's capabilities. She settled into her firing position with the calm precision that had become her trademark. The shot was perfect. The German soldier dropped immediately, and the mortar fire that had been plaguing Soviet supply lines ceased. However, the enemy response was swift and professional. Within minutes, German counter-snipers were moving to triangulate their position, and artillery fire began impacting their general area. The success had come at the cost of compromising their hide site, and evacuation became an immediate priority. The escape from their urban hide site became a running battle through the ruins of Sevastopol. German infantry, supported by armored vehicles, began a systematic search of the area while artillery continued to pound suspected sniper positions. Lyudmila discovered that urban combat required entirely different survival skills than rural operations, knowledge of building layouts, understanding of rubble patterns, and the ability to move silently through destroyed structures filled with debris and obstacles. They eventually reached safety in an underground command bunker. But the experience had demonstrated the increasing sophistication of German counter-sniper operations. The enemy was learning from each encounter, developing better tactics and deploying more resources to neutralize Soviet snipers. The war was escalating, and survival would require constant adaptation and improvement. as the Siege of Sevastopol intensified. Lyudmila found herself operating in an environment that pushed every aspect of her training and natural abilities to their absolute limits. The city was gradually being destroyed by constant bombardment, creating a surreal landscape of rubble, smoke, and death where normal rules of combat no longer applied. Buildings that provided cover one day would be reduced to rubble the next, forcing snipers to constantly relocate and adapt their tactics. The psychological pressure was unlike anything she had experienced during her earlier campaigns. In the open countryside around Kiev, there had been opportunities for rest and recovery between missions. In Sevastopol, the siege meant that combat was continuous, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no respite from the constant threat of death. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours, and every meal might be the last. Her partnership with Pavlichenko evolved into something approaching telepathic communication. They learned to anticipate each other's movements, coordinate their actions without verbal communication, and provide mutual support in situations where a single mistake would be fatal for both of them. This level of teamwork was essential for survival in an environment where German counter-snipers were actively hunting them with sophisticated equipment and extensive training. The enemy snipers they faced in Sevastopol were among the Wehrmacht's best. Major Hans Thorvald, a Bavarian aristocrat with over 40 confirmed kills on the Eastern Front, had been specifically assigned to eliminate Soviet snipers in the Sevastopol sector. Thorvald was a skilled marksman with excellent equipment, but more importantly, he understood the psychological warfare aspects of sniper combat. He would leave messages for his Soviet counterparts, challenging them to duels and attempting to provoke them into making tactical mistakes. Lyudmila's response to these psychological tactics was characteristically direct. Rather than being intimidated or provoked, she studied Thorvald's methods and began developing countermeasures. She realized that the German major's confidence in his own abilities could become a weakness if properly exploited. Arrogance, even well-founded arrogance, could lead to tactical mistakes that a patient opponent could capitalize on. The confrontation between Lyudmila and Thorvald became a deadly chess match that lasted for weeks. Each sniper would take shots at opportunity targets while simultaneously hunting for their primary opponent. The contest was complicated by the urban environment, which provided numerous hiding places but also created complex angles and unpredictable ballistic conditions that challenged even the most experienced marksmen. Thorvald's first attempt to eliminate Lyudmila came during a routine mission against German infantry positions. He had correctly identified one of her favored hide sites and positioned himself to ambush her when she arrived for her next shooting session. The plan was tactically sound and might have succeeded against a less experienced opponent, but Lyudmila had learned to vary her patterns and approach routes to prevent exactly this type of ambush. She spotted the German major's position through careful observation before entering her intended hide site. Thorvald had chosen an excellent position with good concealment and clear fields of fire, but he had made the mistake of remaining in one location too long. Patient surveillance revealed his presence through subtle indicators, a shadow that didn't match the surrounding debris, a reflection that appeared and disappeared too regularly, and most tellingly, the absence of local wildlife in an area where birds and small animals should have been present. Rather than avoiding the area or calling for artillery support, Lyudmila decided to turn the tables on her German counterpart. She identified an alternative position that would allow her to observe Thorvald's hide while remaining concealed herself. The plan required exceptional patience and precise timing, but it offered the possibility of eliminating one of the Wehrmacht's most dangerous snipers while establishing her own reputation as someone who could not be intimidated or outmaneuvered. The counter-ambush required 8 hours of motionless observation. Lyudmila settled into her alternative position before dawn and began the mental and physical discipline necessary for extended surveillance. She controlled her breathing, minimized her movements, and entered the state of focused patience that separated professional snipers from amateurs. Every muscle ache, every physical discomfort had to be ignored in favor of maintaining absolute concentration on the target area. Thorvald's mistake came just after noon, when hunger or thirst caused him to shift position slightly to reach for his water bottle. The movement was minimal, perhaps 6 inches, but it created a clear silhouette against the rubble background that provided Lyudmila with her opportunity. The range was approximately 400 yards, well within her capabilities, and the angle was nearly perfect. The shot that eliminated Major Heinz Thorvald became one of the most celebrated sniper kills of the entire war. Not only had Lyudmila eliminated a dangerous enemy, but she had done so by outthinking and outweighting an opponent who was considered among the Wehrmacht's best marksmen. The psychological impact on German forces was significant. If their top sniper could be eliminated by this Soviet woman, what did that say about their overall tactical superiority? News of Thorvald's death spread rapidly through both armies. For Soviet forces, it became proof that individual skill and determination could triumph over enemy technological and numerical advantages. For German forces, it represented a disturbing indication that their opponents were more capable and dangerous than they had previously believed. The propaganda value of the kill was enormous, but for Lyudmila, it was simply another step in her ongoing mission to defend her homeland. The elimination of Major Thorvald marked a turning point in Lyudmila's military career, but it also brought unwanted attention from the highest levels of the German command structure. Wehrmacht intelligence began compiling detailed files on Soviet snipers, with particular emphasis on the woman who had eliminated one of their most accomplished marksmen. Counter-sniper operations were intensified, and specialized hunting teams were deployed with the specific mission of neutralizing her and other high-value Soviet snipers. The increased enemy attention manifested in ways that made Lyudmila's daily survival significantly more challenging. German artillery began targeting suspected sniper positions with greater frequency and accuracy, suggesting that enemy intelligence was successfully identifying her operational patterns. Radio intercepts indicated that German units were offering substantial rewards for information leading to her capture or elimination, creating additional pressure from potential informants and collaborators. Despite these challenges, Lyudmila's kill count continued to grow steadily. By the spring of 1942, she had confirmed over 200 enemy deaths, making her one of the most successful snipers in the entire Soviet military. Each kill represented not just tactical success, but also proof that individual skill and determination could achieve results that entire units might struggle to accomplish through conventional means. Her success was attracting attention from Soviet political leadership as well. The Communist Party recognized the propaganda value of a female sniper who was consistently outperforming male counterparts and decided to capitalize on her achievements. Newspaper articles began appearing in Soviet publications describing her exploits in terms that sometimes exaggerated her accomplishments but always emphasized her dedication to defending the motherland. The political attention created mixed feelings for Lyudmila. While she appreciated the recognition of her military contributions, she was uncomfortable with being portrayed as a symbol rather than simply as a soldier doing her duty. The propaganda narratives often focused more on her gender than on her professional capabilities, which she found both frustrating and potentially dangerous if it caused enemies to underestimate her or allies to treat her differently. More concerning was the way that publicity was affecting her operational security. Detailed newspaper accounts of her missions provided German intelligence with information that could be used to identify her operational patterns and predict her future activities. Professional soldiers understood that successful snipers survived by being unpredictable and anonymous, qualities that were difficult to maintain when political authorities wanted to use her story for Propaganda purposes. The tension between military necessity and political utility came to a head when Lyudmila was ordered to participate in a propaganda film about Soviet women's contributions to the war effort. The filming required her to demonstrate her shooting techniques and discuss her motivations, activities that potentially compromised tactical secrets while exposing her to additional enemy attention. During the filming process, she met other Soviet women who were making extraordinary contributions to the war effort: pilots, tank commanders, medical personnel, and partisan fighters who were proving that gender was no barrier to military effectiveness. These encounters reinforced her belief that she was part of something larger than individual achievement. She was helping to demonstrate that the Soviet system's commitment to gender equality was producing practical military advantages. The completed propaganda film was distributed throughout the Soviet Union and allied countries, helping to maintain morale during a period when German forces continued to advance and Soviet casualties remained extremely high. International audiences were particularly impressed by footage of Lyudmila calmly hitting targets at ranges that most viewers couldn't even see clearly, providing proof that Soviet claims about her abilities were not exaggerated. However, the film also provided German intelligence analysts with detailed information about her appearance, mannerisms, and tactical preferences. Enemy counterintelligence began developing psychological profiles that could be used to predict her behavior and potentially exploit her operational patterns. The publicity that was intended to boost Soviet morale was simultaneously creating new vulnerabilities that her enemies could exploit. These concerns proved to be well-founded when German forces launched a major offensive against the remaining Soviet positions in Sevastopol. The attack included specific operations targeted at known sniper positions, suggesting that enemy intelligence had successfully identified her operational areas. Artillery barrages were followed by systematic searches conducted by troops who seemed to know exactly where to look for sniper hides. The final battle for Sevastopol began in early June 1942, when German forces launched Operation Sturgeon Catch, a massive assault designed to eliminate the last Soviet resistance in the Crimean Peninsula. The attack involved over 200,000 German and Romanian troops, supported by hundreds of aircraft and artillery pieces that turned the remaining Soviet defensive positions into a hellscape of constant bombardment and ground assault. For Lyudmila and the other defenders, the final battle represented both their greatest challenge and their last opportunity to inflict maximum casualties on the enemy before the inevitable fall of the city. Every shot had to count, every position had to be defended to the last possible moment, and every tactical decision could mean the difference between organized withdrawal and complete annihilation. The intensity of the German assault made normal sniper operations nearly impossible. Constant artillery bombardment meant that static positions became death traps within hours, forcing snipers to adopt hit-and-run tactics that provided fewer opportunities for careful long-range shots. The urban environment was changing hourly as buildings were destroyed and debris patterns shifted, making range estimation and ballistic calculations extremely difficult. Despite these challenges, Lyudmila continued to find opportunities to inflict damage on enemy forces. Her targets shifted from individual soldiers to priority personnel, officers, communication specialists, and heavy weapons crews whose elimination could have disproportionate tactical impact. These shots often required split-second decision-making and precise execution under conditions that would have been impossible for less experienced marksmen. The mission that would define Lyudmila's entire military career came during the final week of organized resistance in Sevastopol. Soviet intelligence had identified a high-value target that represented both an unprecedented opportunity and an almost impossible tactical challenge. German forces had established a forward command post in a heavily fortified position approximately 1,200 yards from the nearest Soviet-controlled territory. and intelligence indicated that a senior enemy commander would be visiting the position to coordinate the final assault on Soviet defensive lines. The target was Oberst Colonel Wilhelm Hoffmann, a veteran officer who had played key roles in several major German victories on the Eastern Front. Hoffmann was known for his tactical brilliance and his habit of personally reconnoitering frontline positions before major operations. His elimination would not only remove a capable enemy commander, but also potentially disrupt German coordination during the crucial final phase of the battle. The tactical challenges were enormous. The 1,200-yard range pushed the effective limits of her Mosin-Nagant rifle and required perfect conditions for accurate shooting. The target area was heavily defended, with multiple machine gun positions and roving patrols that made approach and escape extremely dangerous. Most critically, intelligence indicated that Hoffmann would only be exposed for a few minutes at most, providing an extremely narrow window for success. Conventional military wisdom suggested that the mission was impossible. The range was too great, the conditions too dangerous, and the probability of success too low to justify the risk. However, Lyudmila's track record of successful long-range shots and her demonstrated ability to operate under extreme pressure made her the only Soviet sniper with any realistic chance of success. The mission planning required 3 days of intensive preparation. Intelligence analysts provided detailed maps of the target area. Weather forecasters predicted wind conditions and visibility, and ballistics experts calculated the precise adjustments needed for accurate shooting at extreme range. Every variable that could be controlled was analyzed and planned for, though everyone involved understood that success would ultimately depend on factors that couldn't be predicted or controlled. Lyudmila's approach to the target area required a night infiltration through German-controlled territory that had been the site of intense fighting for months. The ground was littered with unexploded ordnance, abandoned equipment, and obstacles that made silent movement extremely difficult. She was accompanied by Senior Sergeant Pavlichenko, who would serve as spotter and provide security during the mission. The infiltration took over 6 hours and covered less than 2 miles, as they moved carefully through minefields, around enemy patrols, and past observation posts that could have compromised their mission with a single radio call. Every step was planned and executed with the precision of a ballet, as any noise or movement that attracted attention would result in immediate discovery and certain death. They established their hide site in the ruins of a factory building that provided excellent concealment while offering a clear line of sight to the German command post. The position was approximately 1,180 yards from the target, close enough to their planned 1,200-yard shot to make the ballistic calculations valid, but far enough away to provide some security from enemy patrols and observation. The wait for their target began before dawn and stretched through the morning hours as German activity around the command post increased in preparation for Hoffmann's arrival. Lyudmila used the time to study wind conditions, adjust her rifle settings, and mentally rehearse the shot sequence that would determine the mission's success or failure. Hoffmann's arrival was announced by increased radio traffic and the appearance of additional security personnel around the command post. Through their binoculars, they could observe German officers gathering for what appeared to be a briefing session. Intelligence had indicated that Hoffmann would personally inspect the frontline positions, providing the exposure opportunity they needed. At exactly 13:47 hours, Colonel Hoffmann emerged from the command bunker and began walking toward an observation point that would give him a clear view of the Soviet defensive positions he planned to assault. He was accompanied by 2 staff officers and a communications specialist, but his tall figure and distinctive uniform made him clearly identifiable even at the extreme range. Lyudmila settled into her final firing position with the calm precision that had become her trademark. Pavlichenko provided range confirmation and wind readings while she made final adjustments to her rifle scope. The conditions were as perfect as they could hope for: clear visibility, minimal wind, and a target that was moving predictably toward the optimal shooting position. The ballistic calculations for a 1,200-yard shot were complex and unforgiving. The bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach the target, during which time gravity would drop it several feet and any crosswind would deflect it laterally. The target was moving, which required additional calculations about lead time and trajectory prediction. Most challenging of all, the extreme range meant that even tiny errors in estimation or execution would result in complete misses. Lyudmila's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm she had perfected over hundreds of previous shots. Her heart rate decreased as she entered the state of focused concentration that eliminated all distractions and reduced the world to just the target, the rifle, and the inevitable connection between them. Years of training and combat experience had prepared her for this moment, but success would ultimately depend on factors beyond human control. Hoffman reached the observation point and raised his binoculars to study the Soviet positions. For perhaps 30 seconds, he remained motionless in the perfect shooting position, fully exposed, clearly silhouetted against the sky, and completely unaware that he was being observed by one of the most dangerous snipers in the Soviet military. The shot, when it came, was the culmination of everything Lyudmila had learned about marksmanship, tactics, and war. The rifle's recoil was absorbed by her perfectly positioned body. The muzzle flash was concealed by the carefully constructed hide, and the sound was partially masked by the constant background noise of artillery fire and small arms combat that characterized the Sevastopol battlefield. The bullet's flight took 1.7 seconds, an eternity in combat time, but merely a heartbeat in the broader context of the war. During that brief interval, the carefully calculated trajectory carried the projectile across more than a kilometer of contested battlefield, through air currents and atmospheric conditions that could have deflected it in any direction toward a target who remained unaware that his life was measured in fractions of seconds. Colonel Wilhelm Hoffman dropped immediately, the binoculars falling from his hands as the bullet found its mark with the precision that had made Lyudmila legendary among both Soviet and German forces. The other German officers initially thought their commander had taken cover, but within seconds they realized what had happened and began the frantic security procedures that followed any successful sniper attack. Pavlichenko confirmed the kill through his spotting scope while simultaneously scanning for threats and escape routes. "Perfect shot," he whispered to Lyudmila. 1,200 yards, move-in target, perfect conditions. That's going to be remembered for a very long time. His professional assessment was correct. The shot would indeed become legendary, representing both the pinnacle of individual marksmanship and the symbolic victory of determination over seemingly impossible odds. The German response was swift and overwhelming. Artillery began impacting their general area within minutes, followed by systematic searches conducted by troops who were clearly enraged by the loss of their commander. Smoke and dust filled the air as high-explosive shells destroyed potential sniper positions, and the sound of approaching vehicles indicated that armored units were being deployed to seal off possible escape routes. The evacuation from their hide site became a running battle through the industrial ruins of Sevastopol. German forces, motivated by the loss of a senior commander, pursued them with unprecedented intensity and resources. Machine gun fire, mortar rounds, and rifle shots created a deadly gauntlet that tested every aspect of their training and experience. They eventually reached Soviet lines after a harrowing 3-hour escape that left both snipers physically and emotionally exhausted. The successful completion of what military historians would later call one of the most remarkable sniper shots in warfare history had come at tremendous personal cost and had demonstrated the extreme dangers that elite soldiers faced when operating behind enemy lines. The successful elimination of Colonel Hoffman became the defining moment of Lyudmila's military career, but it also marked the beginning of the end of her combat service. The wound she sustained during the escape from their hide site, shrapnel from a German mortar round that had exploded nearby, was more serious than initially believed and required medical treatment that was not available in the besieged city. Soviet command made the difficult decision to evacuate their most successful sniper from Sevastopol before the city's final fall. The evacuation was justified on both medical and strategic grounds. Lyudmila's combat experience and tactical knowledge were too valuable to lose in what everyone understood would be the final collapse of organized resistance in the Crimean Peninsula. The evacuation took place during one of the last submarine runs to reach Sevastopol before the city fell to German forces. Lyudmila found herself aboard a crowded Soviet submarine, surrounded by other wounded soldiers and essential personnel who were being withdrawn to fight another day. The underwater journey to safety was a surreal contrast to the months of constant combat she had endured above ground. Her final combat statistics were remarkable by any measure. In less than 1 year of active service, she had achieved 309 confirmed enemy kills, including 36 enemy snipers who had been specifically hunting her. The 1,200-yard shot that eliminated Colonel Hoffman was recorded as the longest successful sniper kill by a female marksman in military history, a record that would stand for decades. The transition from active combat to recovery and rehabilitation was psychologically difficult for someone who had become accustomed to the intense focus and clear objectives of sniper warfare. The skills that had made her supremely effective in combat, hypervigilance, aggressive responses to perceived threats, and the ability to make life or death decisions in seconds, were less useful in civilian medical facilities and recovery centers. Soviet authorities recognized both her military achievements and her propaganda value, leading to a new phase of her service that involved public appearances, training new snipers, and participating in diplomatic missions designed to strengthen relationships with allied nations. These activities were important for the war effort, but they represented a fundamental change from the direct combat role where she had found her greatest success and personal satisfaction. Her visit to the United States in 1942 as part of a Soviet delegation was particularly significant. American audiences were fascinated by this young woman who had achieved military success that few men could match, and her appearances helped strengthen American support for the Soviet war effort during a critical period when the outcome of the conflict remained uncertain. The American tour included meetings with political leaders, appearances at military facilities, and public speeches that helped educate Americans about the reality of the conflict of the Renouncé war on the Eastern Front. Her ability to describe combat conditions and tactical situations with professional precision, while maintaining the personal dignity and strength that had made her legendary, provided American audiences with a unique perspective on Soviet military capabilities. During her time in America, she met with President Franklin Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who were both impressed by her combination of military professionalism and personal character. These high-level meetings helped establish her as not just a successful soldier, but as a representative of the Soviet Union who could effectively communicate with international audiences about the war effort. The international recognition was gratifying, but Lyudmila remained focused on her primary identity as a soldier serving her country. She used her public platform to advocate for increased military support for the Soviet Union and to educate international audiences about the sacrifices being made by Soviet soldiers and civilians in the fight against fascism. Her post-combat military service included training new generations of Soviet snipers, passing on the tactical knowledge and psychological insights she had gained through months of successful operations against some of the world's most capable military forces. These training activities ensured that her combat experience would continue to contribute to Soviet military effectiveness long after her own active service had ended. The war ended with Lyudmila having achieved a level of military success that was unprecedented for female soldiers and remarkable even by the standards of male snipers. Her 309 confirmed kills represented not just individual achievement, but proof that determination, skill, and courage could overcome seemingly impossible odds in defense of fundamental human values. Years later, military historians would analyze her techniques and achievements, trying to understand how a young woman, who had started the war as a university student, had become one of the most effective individual combatants in human history. The analysis would focus on her technical skills, tactical intelligence, and psychological preparation, but it would often miss the most important factor: her absolute commitment to defending her homeland and her people against an enemy that threatened their very existence. The post-war years brought Lyudmila face to face with a challenge that no amount of combat training had prepared her for: learning to live with the memories of everything she had experienced and accomplished during the most intense period of human conflict in history. The transition from being one of the Soviet Union's most feared and respected warriors to becoming a civilian in a world trying to rebuild itself was perhaps more difficult than any mission she had undertaken during the war. The Soviet Union, in 1945, was a nation transformed by victory, but scarred by unimaginable losses. Over 27 million Soviet citizens had died during the war, and virtually every family had lost someone to the conflict. Lyudmila returned to a country where her achievements were celebrated, but where the full cost of victory was still being calculated and would continue to be felt for generations. Her personal losses were significant and painful. Her husband, Alexei, had been killed in action during the defense of Leningrad, making her a war widow at the age of 26. Many of her closest friends and comrades from her university days and military service had not survived the war, leaving her with memories and experiences that few people could understand or share. The psychological adjustment to peacetime proved to be an ongoing challenge. The hypervigilance and split-second decision-making that had kept her alive during combat were difficult to turn off in civilian situations. Loud noises could trigger intense reactions, crowded spaces felt threatening, and the absence of clear objectives and immediate dangers left her feeling purposeless and disconnected. Soviet authorities continued to value her contributions and assigned her to various roles that utilized her military experience and public recognition. She worked with veteran organizations, participated in memorial events, and served as a symbol of Soviet military achievement during various diplomatic and cultural exchanges. These activities were meaningful but could never replicate the intense sense of purpose she had experienced during combat. Her completion of her university education, interrupted by the war, became a priority during the immediate post-war years. She returned to Kiev University to finish her history degree, bringing to her studies a perspective that few academic historians could match. Her thesis examined the tactical evolution of sniper warfare during World War II, combining academic research with personal experience in ways that created new insights into military history and combat psychology. The academic work provided intellectual satisfaction and a sense of continuity with her pre-war life, but it also forced her to analyze and contextualize experiences that had been driven by immediate survival needs rather than scholarly reflection. Writing about combat tactics and strategic decisions, while remembering the faces of the men she had killed, created emotional challenges that required ongoing resolution. Her marriage to a fellow veteran in 1948 represented an attempt to build a normal life based on shared understanding of wartime experiences. Her new husband understood the psychological costs of combat service and provided the emotional support necessary for her continued adjustment to civilian life. Their relationship was built on mutual respect for what each had endured and accomplished. During the war, the birth of her son in 1950 marked another significant transition in her post-war life. Motherhood provided new purposes and responsibilities that helped channel her protective instincts in positive directions. The experience of raising a child in peacetime offered opportunities to contribute to the future rather than dwelling on the destructive experiences of the past. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Lyudmila continued to serve as a public representative of Soviet military achievement and women's capabilities. Her appearances at veteran events, military ceremonies, and international gatherings helped maintain awareness of the sacrifices made during the war, while demonstrating that individual achievement could transcend traditional gender roles and social expectations. Her involvement in training programs for Soviet marksmen ensured that her tactical knowledge and combat experience continued to benefit military effectiveness long after her own active service had ended. She worked with shooting clubs, military academies, and specialized training programs, passing on skills and insights that had been developed under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The recognition she received from various governments and military organizations acknowledged not just her individual achievements, but her representation of the millions of Soviet citizens who had contributed to the victory over fascism. Awards and honors from the Soviet Union, allied nations, and international organizations recognized her unique combination of military effectiveness and symbolic importance. As the decades passed, historians and military analysts began to study her achievements with the perspective that time and access to previously classified information provided. Her tactical innovations, psychological approaches to combat stress, and adaptation to different operational environments became subjects of academic study and professional military education. The Cold War period created complex political contexts for her public appearances and international recognition. While her wartime achievements remained uncontroversial, her role as a representative of Soviet military capabilities became part of broader geopolitical tensions between former allies who had become adversaries. Despite these political complications, her personal story continued to inspire people around the world who were facing their own challenges and obstacles. The narrative of a young woman who had transformed herself from a university student into one of history's most effective warriors resonated with audiences who were dealing with their own struggles against seemingly impossible odds. Her final years were spent documenting her experiences and insights for future generations. Interviews, memoirs, and documentary projects captured not just the tactical and strategic aspects of her military service, but also the personal and psychological dimensions of combat that are often overlooked in conventional military histories. When Lyudmila Pavlichenko died in 1974, she was mourned not just as a war hero, but as someone who had demonstrated that individual courage and determination could make a difference in conflicts that seemed too large for any one person to influence. Her legacy extended beyond her military achievements to encompass her post-war contributions to education, veteran affairs, and international understanding. The woman who had once been dismissed as just the cook had proven that labels and assumptions about human capabilities are often not just wrong, but dangerously limiting. Her 309 confirmed enemy kills represented more than individual marksmanship. They demonstrated that dedication, training, and courage could overcome any obstacle when applied in defense of fundamental human values. Her story continues to inspire military professionals, historians, and anyone who faces challenges that seem insurmountable. The university student who became a legendary sniper proved that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand their best efforts and when they refuse to accept limitations imposed by others' expectations. The legacy of Lyudmila Pavlichenko extends far beyond her military service to encompass broader lessons about human potential, gender equality, and the power of individual action in the face of overwhelming challenges. Her life demonstrated that history is shaped not just by large forces and famous leaders, but by ordinary people who find within themselves the courage to do extraordinary things when their values and their people are threatened. Up next, you've Got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.